everyone, welcome back to ABCD. This month's video is going to be a continuation of the discussion. It's going to be the second part. There'll be one more part of it. I hope you guys enjoy it. And our next question is, how have stereotypes affected you, like specifically Asian stereotypes? I know like one main stereotype that affects me is like you're smart, and I know like one time in middle school I'd be like, I was freaking out that my grades were low and someone goes, oh, you have A pluses, you're fine.
Yeah, I think the stereotypes affect your character and who you depict yourself as to other people in school or outside. Because I talked about this earlier, but we can talk about this later as well, excuse me. But in television or kids shows particularly, the Indian character, there's usually one or two Indian characters, they're always depicted as the smart, brainy, nerdy types, and always know the answer to everything. They're always the best in school. And I kind of modeled my personality after those characters, especially throughout elementary and middle school. Just trying to be the smart kid and nothing else, focused on studying all the time. And that kind of wasn't who I really was or who I wanted to be. I just thought that was the way I had to be. But once I got exposed to other types of media or just matured myself, I saw that, no, I don't have to be this kind of thing. And I kind of developed my own personality, what I like to do, who I want to portray myself as. And I think I would have broken out of my shell much earlier if it wasn't for those harmful stereotypes inflicted by those television shows.
I think going off of those stereotypes, like what you said is so true. The portrayal of like Indians are always like this smart, brainiac kind of person, and I think that also influenced like my parents. Like they would always say with me like to watch these shows, and they saw this, and because of how they were raised, they would always tell me like like you want to have good grades, and like obviously I wanted that too. But like I always think when I was younger, I also always wanted to like go into sports, but like my parents would be like, but like you have to study, and it took such a long time. I think it was only in like 8th grade when I finally convinced my parents to let me go out and like play basketball and be part of a team. And so they were like, you can only do it as long as your grades like stay up. And I was like, of course, of course. And so like, my grades stayed up and I played basketball. When I got into high school, obviously things suddenly took like a turn because suddenly college is like on the corner. You have colleges and like you have to apply for scholarships and all the good stuff that comes with being a high schooler. But like my parents were like, you can't like go for anything if your grades aren't good. And I always remember my argument was like I would talk to my parents and I called them Amma and Appa, but I would be like, like that's not all colleges look for. Like just because I have good grades doesn't mean like a college is gonna take me. And I remember at first they were always so angry with me. They'd be like, why do you say that? Like, how do you know that? And I would be like, colleges want like a well balanced person. They're not gonna take someone just because they have good grades, but they didn't do anything else in their life. Which I think it took like years and years of convincing them. Now it's like when they're like, okay, you can go for sports, you can go for clubs, like I guess that's a good thing for you to do. But like that balance between just studying and also being someone that studies and does like these extracurriculars and goes out with friends, that's also a really big part of who you are, and like what you choose to do with your life outside of school is also something everybody deserves the chance to do. But like if you're part of a community that reinforces studying and like studying habits like this, it's really difficult for you to like be able to break out of that shell of just studying and increasing your chances of being like other places.
Yeah, another one of the stereotypes I think that negatively affect us is kind of the stereotype that all Asians are really focused, cutthroat, really have a direction of what they want to do, where they want to be. And that kind of plays into the role of mental health in society, because sometimes you're not sure what you want to do or you're not sure where you want to go in life, and that causes stress, or all the extracurriculars or studying you do leads to stress, and people just expect you that you get over it easily because you're Asian and you're smart, you can do all these things easily. Like personally, this quarter for me, I felt a lot of burnout with all the stuff I was doing and focusing on school and returning back to school in person. And I really didn't have an outlet to kind of express that stress or just get it off my shoulders, So that's definitely an issue that needs to be talked about more, the role of mental health in society and how it can be more easily accessed to Asian Americans and Indian Americans, how they can get that out more comfortably.
I think like the mental health is also a really good point because you also, again, I'm speaking from the girl's perspective, but like girls are also expected to do things differently than the boys. Like obviously boys and girls both have like the societal pressures pushed on them, but they're completely different because I know for my brother has he's in 7th grade right now, so he has pressures like my parents pressuring him to do well in school, but like as a junior in high school now, my parents were like, you have to do well in school, make sure you're like staying in clubs and sports and you're doing well in church and like you're in the choir and you have your college applications and you have all of these tests coming up. Like when you just constantly hear all of this and on top of that, like the microaggressions you might face on society, whether you're like scrolling through Instagram or TikTok, it's sometimes just like enough to make someone just like completely lose their mind. Because I know there are some days when I've just like I've had so much school to do and I just like go on TikTok to like maybe relax and suddenly all you see is like hate towards people of like your own race. You're just like, why am I fighting for this? Like, why do I still do this? And like you remember like it's for the little kids that are growing up that you're making these changes for because so they don't have to go through what we go through now.
That's definitely like a good point. Like one of the main reasons why I'm doing this is for the little kids. Like I'm so happy my sisters did not go to what was the school at? Helen Keller. I was the only brown kid in my class from kindergarten to 5th grade. That did a lot of damage. I'm still trying to find like a good balance. I'm more oriented towards my culture. I love watching Bollywood movies. You can ask anyone. I know every movie by heart. But it was just really hard for me to find someone to just talk about it because I'm not that I haven't been open to American culture as much as other people. And just knowing that like my sisters don't have to face that means a lot to me.
I think the thing about culture too, when I was in elementary and middle school, people would always ask me like, "Hey, do you watch like one of the like Jane Austen or Pride and Prejudice, which are like these old timey American classics?" So like obviously everybody growing up in America would like know this, but like obviously my parents weren't raised here; they don't know this. So like they raised me with the Bollywood movies, they raised me with like Malayalam songs and those kinds of movies, and like so I'd be like, no, I don't know. And they're like, how could you not know that? It's so popular. And I would be like, sorry, like I wasn't raised with that. Like now I have like, I think I have a better balance between like American culture and like Indian culture. But like I sometimes feel myself drifting towards one side or the other. And like I think it's definitely something that kids need help with. Like you can't expect a child growing up to be like, oh, I know my exact balance between these two cultures that I'm like constantly torn between.
Yeah, there's definitely a really real conflict of cultures. Just to play the other hand, there's some Indian children or Indian American children that have lived here their whole lives, haven't really been exposed to the Indian culture, and when they don't know certain aspects of the culture, they're looked down upon. They're seen as whitewashed, as a sense, like they've strayed far away from their values. They're not real Indians in that sense. From aspects to clothing to movies or culture or food, like the shirt I'm wearing around, flannel shirt, t-shirt, that's seen as a kind of a white clothing, if I'm being honest. But once we immigrate here, we have to integrate into this country's values too, of course, but at the same time it's really hard to find that perfect balance of integrating into American values, but also staying true to Indian values and, just knowing everything.
I feel like sometimes first generations will tear each other down. Like what Nepal was saying, like, oh, you're a coconut. You don't know about, like, this Hindi movie? How can you not know about this? Or, like, on the other spectrum, like, you've never heard of the Beatles? Like, how can you not? It's, like, one of the most inspirational band. And it's just, like, you just never win. You just can't do anything. It's, like, it's either you have to be all the way Indian or you have to be all the way American.
Thing is like the thing about the t-shirts is also like a good point because whenever I go to India, I know like the stereotype is girls always at least in like the junctions where we live, Girls are always seen in like either these long dresses or skirts that go into like their ankles, like long sleeve shirts that go down to their wrists, like nothing of their bodies exposed, or they're constantly wearing like chudars or something. And I go home and like I'm just in my casual sweatpants and t-shirt, and like that's just how I walk out. And I remember when I was little, I would always go up to like my grandparents and like my parents. I'd be like, "Why are people staring at me? Like, what am I doing wrong?" And they're like, "It's because of what you're wearing." And I'm like, "What's wrong with what I'm wearing?" And they're like, "You're showing your elbows." And I'm like, "My elbows?" And like I think that's a constant stereotype girls have to go through. Like, not allowed to show your shoulders, not allowed to show below your knees, you can't show your ankles. And I would like constantly be like, "What? Why do girls have to go through this? Like, what is the issue here?" Like growing up, now like I wear like pants and like shirts still, but like I still get weird looks when I'm not wearing like your cultural Indian clothing. And I know like sometimes girls like they whisper because they don't think I know like my dad, but like I do. So like I hear them, they're like, "Oh my gosh, that girl's wearing a t-shirt and pants. Like, is she even Indian?" And I'm just like, why can't you just like let me live my life how I want to live? Like, don't bend me to your cultural values if that's what you think is right. Like, I think that's something that society needs to face.